Team Miraclon, along with printpackaging.com and Network Event, extends a warm welcome to our speakers and attendees who have joined us from across the world. The webinar today, Fuel Your Growth with Flexo, focuses on how changing your packaging print process can open up more opportunities and save you money. Today, we have an excellent set of speakers, which include Mr. Krish Chhatwal, partner Quality Offset Printers. Quality Offset is a well-known name in the label print arena as a leader in high-end labels. Over the last 60 years, Quality Offset have grown at a rapid pace and invested in the latest and best technologies that the market has to offer. They firmly believe in pushing the boundaries with new innovative solutions for their customer, a testament to which are the many awards they have received from industry bodies over the years for the stellar work they have displayed. Next, we have Mr. Vinay Nalawade, Director, Parakh Agro Ltd. He is a veteran in the flexible packaging space with over 3 decades of hands-on experience in the field. Over the years, Mr. Vinay has been focusing on driving business growth and has championed the cause of Flexo, especially through his role as an early adopter of the technology that has changed the Flexo landscape. A technocrat with a passion for collaborative and sustainable business growth, he is leading the Parakh Agro flexible packaging business on its growth trajectory. And finally, Mr. Steve Smith, Principal Consultant, Miraclon. Steve has over 40 years of experience in the print and packaging industry, and in the last decade, he has been involved with Miraclon's Kodak Flexel solutions that are benefiting both brands and the printers. They are also enabling the industry to transform Flexo. Steve is currently engaged with the Application Development Group and works under the guidance of Dr. John Anderson at Miraclon.
Thank you, Parakh. Thank you and welcome to our webinar. Thank you. Next slide, if we're good. We're just a bit of an agenda of what we're going through. So just really an overview of the market overview of packaging, overall trends in narrow and wide web, then also talking about Flexo NX for the narrow web. And then Krish will be talking about Kwality Labels and what they're doing. I'll then go back to trends in wide web and then talk about Flexo NX for wide web applications. And then Mr. Vinay will be talking about his experience at Parakh Agro. Then I'll come back and talk about what's important to a brand and then summarize, then we'll have the question and answers. Next slide, please. Okay, so printing and packaging and labels, it's a healthy thing, even in COVID times. It's still, the market is growing and continues to grow above or in line with gross domestic product worldwide. Simply, there's no electronic substitute for packaging. So as long as we keep eating, we still need packaging. So media fragmentation, mainly digital, as really, when you think about it, consumers are bombarded with information and messages. Packaging is the only media channel, and print media channel at that still attracts consumer attention. If you look at, over this pandemic, we've been feeding most people out of supermarkets, with restaurants, and certainly in my country, closed. Everything's coming out of the supermarket. Next slide, please. So just global packaging by the end market. And this is something that's quite interesting. More than 50% of it is in food. This is the global packaging, everything, from boxes to bottles, to cans, and then if we look at the next slide, please, to the by major media, flexible represents 55% of the food packaging, which is over 50% of the overall packaging. That's a massive market, absolutely massive, and in flexibles. Thank you. Next slide. The compound annual growth is predicted from 2020 to 2026 to be growing at 3.89% per year. It's massive. And the growth drivers that the Mod or Intelligence report tagged as being the drivers are technological innovation, sustainability trepidations, and attractive economics. That is in flexible packaging. Right? So people are looking at flexible as being, something to is something more economical than producing glass, for example. So there's a lot of activity in that. Sorry, thank you. Next slide. Excitingly, in India, you're looking at packaging as the 5th largest sector in the Indian economy and one of the highest growth sectors in the country. And according to the Your Packaging Industry Association of India, that sector is growing at 22 to 25% per annum. These are remarkable figures, and it just goes to show that the growth is very healthy and it will continue to grow. Thank you. Now, the trends, when we look at the trends, back in the 1980s, the supermarkets had approximately 7,000 products on the shelf. Today, the average supermarket has around about 40,000 to 50,000 products. So what we're seeing smaller quantities. Production numbers are decreasing, so run lengths are decreasing, but the number of jobs is increasing. Next slide, please. So if we look at smaller quantities, doesn't mean less print. Now, when you look at the this particular product, if you look at this particular product, this was they used to print millions of these Tim Tam biscuits in Australia, and it was all done gravure. They then introduced, through going into Flexo, they introduced other flavors of that particular brand. And so where they used to have 1,000,001 product, there could be 10 variations of 100,000 cycles per product. And then they now have variations. So they've gone from 1 to 6, just you're seeing here, and then they have they have competitions. And so the flexible packaging, and particularly in Flexo in particular, has given them be able to be faster to the market and to be able to try out different flavors without having to run 1,000,000 of them. Thank you. The other trend, which is we're seeing a lot of and hearing a lot about, is sustainable. And if we just look at this quote from Packaging Unwrapped in 2019, sustainable packaging is no longer a nice to have. It's a must have for any brand looking to future-proof their operations against the rising tide of consumer scrutiny. So we're seeing this, we're seeing a lot of it being reduced, recycle, reuse, and then brands are looking at recyclable or biodegradable substrates. Now that involves monopolymer materials to enable recycling. And there's a lot of businesses in India that are looking at this in terms of just a single polymer substrate to make recycling more efficient and to be able to recycle. There's a lot of work being done looking at paper or plant-based substrates, biodegradable substrates, which is an exciting thing in itself. Functional coatings, where you've got the opportunity with a lot of ink research is being done in terms of replacing certain plastics or metal barrier substrates with a functional coating. Recycling is a challenge, and not only is it a challenge to sort the material, but it's also a challenge to get the infrastructure in place to recycle. So there's a lot of focus in terms of being recycling ready, in readiness to start this. One of the things about the recycling being a challenge is that how do you actually differentiate the different products as they go through? Now, there's a company in the States, Digimark, they've developed a indistinguishable digital watermark, which is printed as part of the pack, that actually when the pack's going through a recycling facility, the scanners will pick it up and route those particular packs. So the watermark is an identity of the recycling characteristics of the product. And in Europe, they've just had success rate of 95% success in some trials, and they're moving into an industrial trial next month. But in all, we need to reduce the waste in all processes. And that's got to be a key issue when we talk about being sustainable. It's about reducing waste. Next, please. The other trend that we're seeing is the use of extended colour gamut, both with CMYK, where you can actually have higher densities and extend the gamut, and then have the designers work within that colour gamut. But then there's also the extended colour gamut with CMYK, orange, green, violet, or red, green, blue, whichever it is, and that can reproduce over 90% of the 2000 PMS colours with accuracy. The key thing to take away with this is that this is how digital printing works, CMYK OGV. It's how digital printing works. And I borrowed from Benny Lander his chart, which you can see on the left, the colour gamut of CMYK offset, which is an ISO standard, so it's slightly smaller than what we'd probably look at with the CMYK space. But you can see those brand colours fall outside of the gamut. You then introduce CMYK orange, blue, green, and it opens up the gamut, and those corporate colours fall into that. Thank you. Digital labels for Flexo. This is an interesting thing because originally most people thought labels will just go all digital, but now we're seeing a trend where digital labels are going to Flexo. And the reason for that is that when you look at label volumes, 60% of all label volumes are high volume or commodity labels, primarily for the FMCG sector, the supermarkets that we deal in. The majority of the growth in this sector is with shrink sleeves and in mold labels. And then there's the issue of digital or Flexo. Digital has a fixed cost per label, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's not cost effective in most cases for high volume commodity labels with speed and cost, which is then we're seeing a lot of digital only printers now looking at hybrid presses or Flexo to get the cost efficiencies of higher volumes and lower print costs once you get over a certain volume. Next, please. So this is where Flexo NX comes into for narrow web. We have an unparalleled ink flow control with our DigiCap NX patterning. Now, this is when you're looking at DigiCap NX for narrow web. One of the things we're seeing is the analoxes that most people use have really been selected based on 30-year-old methodologies. Really, when we look at what we do with the ink control on the ink to the from the analogs to the plate to the substrate, we control it completely differently. And there's an opportunity to optimize the analoxes to get the best ink lay down, not necessarily using the analoxes that have been used for 30 years in volume and line count. One of the things that Flexo NX has is it's highly consistent and repeatable. And it also reproduces the entire tonal range. It doesn't fill in at 85, 90%, and we can go all the way down to 0. But that enables us to have an accurate, repeatable proof to print match. So then you set your customers' expectations at the proof, not on the press. And that's one of the key things that I want to have a takeaway is that you look at, you've really got to get the expectation set at the proof, not at the press. Now, there's some reasons for that, and we'll talk about that later. But the other thing that the plates do is we don't have any need for a bump curve on the highlight, which ends up flattening off the highlight range. So we can get the entire gradient in those critical areas to your eye, those highlights. And that's the ability to fade to 0. And it's across colors at 175 line screen. Not a problem printing at 175 line cost effectively on narrow web. And then using extended color gamut enables rapid changeover of jobs, produces quality parity with digital printing, and that's a key thing. And then a few years back, we introduced our Flexo NX Ultra system. That's soon going to be available in the region. It's a water process plate. So again, thinking about sustainable issues, there's no solvents involved in it, it's just water washed. You can produce a plate in an hour. But the critical thing from our point of view is that the images that you're still making plates with today with Flexo NX can produce these plates. We still have the same square spot imaging, and we also have the quality parity with NX, including fade to 0 with those water wash plates. They're quite unique. Thank you. Now this is the crossover point. You'll often hear this spoken about. Benny Lander suggested that the crossover point between analog from digital is around about 7,000 linear meters. That is that anything up to 7,000 linear meters with digital print is cost effective over flexible printing. Once you get above there, the unit costs drop. As you know, with can we just pull that slide back one, if you wouldn't mind, please? Yeah, thank you. So the crossover point is based on where the unit cost of the Flexo printing reaches a point at the fixed cost of the digital print. Now, whether you print 1 or 100,000 digital labels, they are always the same cost. So yet with Flexo, you have a tooling cost, a make-ready cost, and then the material cost. So once you run longer, the fixed costs get amortized into the unit costs, and it keeps dropping to a point where you're just paying for the materials to go through. Yes, click now if you could. If you then decrease the make-ready times by having proof to match and very quick, fast turnarounds, you're reducing the higher setup costs, and then you're reducing that crossover point. And we're going to see more of that as the efficiencies in Flexo continue to grow. You're going to see more of this crossover being reduced. Digital will still be stuck at a fixed cost. They may reduce their costs, which will then make that that crossover point probably move their favour, but that's what's happening at the moment. Thank you. Now, we've got 30 seconds to answer a poll that the guys have put up. The question will be coming up in a minute. So if you can just select one of the questions that will come up. So what is the deciding factor when choosing whether to print a label or on digital or Flexo? Is it run length, turnaround time, expected by client, job quality demands, including embellishments, total cost of print process? So if you can just pick one of those. Somebody said it should have been all of the above, but that doesn't really do much to the poll. Okay. So we should have the, this is really cool, the nice thing. Wow, that's interesting. Run length, yeah, 43%, turnaround time, job quality demands. That's interesting. That's impressive. Yeah, okay. Thank you. That is very interesting. Right, next slide. Now I'll hand you over to Krish from Kwality Offset Printers, and over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Krish, partner at Kwality Offset Printers. So today I'll be speaking a bit about my company and how Flexo NX has contributed to our growth as well in the label segment. So moving on to the next slide. We at Kwality Offset, so we are pioneers when it comes to labels, be it wet glue labels, self-adhesive labels. We have over 50 years of experience in this industry, and we are not just printers, we are the solution providers. So we always encourage brand owners to talk to us in detail regarding their projects, their plans, about the number of SKUs they have, and so that we can properly advise them what kind of materials and finishes they should go for, and to what technology we should take up their job. So we cater to a lot of industries like cosmetics, liquor, pharma, food, beverage, and even durables. We have all the latest technologies in-house when it comes to digital, offset, or even Flexo. We at Kwality Offset, we always believe in investing in high quality technologies, and the materials which we use are all of the best of the materials which are available in the market. We have a fully automated production line controlled by a company-wide ERP by Flexibles, which helps us to be transparent all throughout our production line, and even uh, enables us to move faster throughout the production line. When it comes to MOQ, as we have digital as well in-house, so the customers can even buy one label from us and we'll be able to cater to them. Be it a completely finished label, right from any sort of finishes from foiling, lamination, or anything they want, they can even purchase one label from us. Apart from high quality labels, we always believe in providing a good customized service to our clients, and we have a number of people deployed to each and every client so that they get a customized service and experience. We have a lot of clients like Pernod Ricard, Nestle, Dabur, Cargill, Cremica, and even Asian Paints, and some of the clients are with us for the past 35 years. When it comes to specialized products, we have a lot of variable data and anti-counterfeit labels and tokens as well. These sort of products help brand owners to gather data like graphical location, age, gender, etc. of their end consumers, and also help them to run various cashback schemes and augmented reality campaigns as well. When it comes to CSR initiative, we have a few tie-ups with special agencies, which helps us to handle our waste generated during our production process in a better manner. Next slide, please. So why Flexel NX system? As Steve also pointed out, I think most of the points are covered. Like NX system has enabled us to get the offset like quality even in Flexo. So many jobs when we went to Flexo, we were able to easily shift those jobs from offset to Flexo, and customers were even happier than before. They were able to experience a better quality than offset as well in some of the labels. Due to the patented flat top technology, DigiCap NX patterning, we are able to get crisp image production, and even the highlights that you can see in the labels are really fine. So apart from that, when it comes to after sale services and even the RM and equipment, there is no issue at all in Flexel NX system, and it's a complete, it has been a complete package, and it's a good ROI for us. Moving on to the next slide. So we always believe in investing in right technology and training our employees regularly. When it comes to Flexel NX, there is very less image correction at pre-press stage, and we save a lot of time and resources. Even the chemicals which are used to process the plates are greener, and they are more environment friendly than other technologies, which apart from that, I would like to point out few points why you should have in-house plate making system and in comparison to outsourcing the plates to other vendors. So you will be having a lot of advantages, like you have less downtime on press. You can call the client for online approvals to your company, and if you can make a number of changes faster than before. We have less downtime on press as well due to this latest technology by Kodak NX. Now, if you see overall, we have complete control over inks, plates. So because of that, we are able to work seamlessly in the company. And when it comes to profitability, we are able to save a lot of costs like paper, inks, and I would say 5 to 8% costs are saved than before. As we have our in-house plate making system, and we don't have to outsource the plates to other vendors, we are able to, there's a safety of data and artworks which are provided by the clients. So that's also a very important point when you are signing NDA with your clients. Next slide, please. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Krish. Yeah, that's interesting insights, and appreciate your openness with that. So it's very good. I like the idea of being a solution provider, because we like providing solutions for our clients as well. So it's a good partnership, and it's great to have clients like yourself and Parakh Agro to help grow this this industry. Just moving on to trends in wide web Flexo. Not dissimilar to the trends I started talking about. The average run lengths have decreased, with greater number of SKUs, number of product variations as I went through. But in the flexible packaging and wide web, we're seeing there's a greater awareness of brands in terms of Flexo's capabilities and improved quality. And I think 10 years ago, it probably would have been, it's Gravure for quality and Flexo for a price. And when I first joined the this industry many years ago, there used to be a saying, service, price, and quality, pick any two. Today, the expectation is that you have all three, and where we're seeing Flexo making massive inroads into the growth of flexible packaging is through the fact that the quality has improved dramatically. And one of the things we do is to look at how we can do work that was traditionally the domain of Gravure. And I've often said that Gravure is still described by the European Gravure Association as its key selling points as being high quality, vibrant colors, and all the things that we're now being known for. And so, there's less difference between the two. One of the things that we're seeing a trend is that is in using computer-driven plate cutting to produce complex and cuts on the plate to minimize the effect of the plate joint. Now, plate joining within flexible printing is a given. We've even got a plate join in our name. If you look at the O in Miraclon, there's a gap at the top. That's to signify a plate joint. I've often expressed my view to marketing, we should try and close that gap on the O. They think I'm crazy, but the fact is that using a computer-driven, a Kongsberg or a Zund table to cut the plates off, where you can actually create a very accurate and complex, you can weave your way through a job so that you don't actually see the plate joint. So that's a trend that we're seeing a lot of. There's also a lot of ongoing developments and improvements in water-based inks. We're seeing some massive changes in that. It's still work in progress, I got to say. A lot of work being done in Japan, amazing amount of work being done in the major press manufacturers, Bobst and our partners, W&H. We're very close to those people, and we see what they're doing, and with the ink manufacturers, it's quite exciting. Now that has a sustainability point to it, obviously, because there's no VOCs. We're also seeing simplified extended color gamut methodology, and that is to take the black magic and the fear out of color management, and in particularly with the extended color gamut. That's got the opportunity of replacing the spot colors and having CMYK and spot colors reproduced out of 7 colors. And I've got a little bit more information about that, which we'll discuss. The other thing is that, the trend, a major trend, is the growing focus on sustainability. Now, it's driven by consumer concerns. And the intention isn't to eliminate plastics, but more about how to use less and to recycle. And there are several initiatives in place, many businesses and hundreds of brands getting on board because they know it's something that people and consumers are interested in. And one of the things that a lot of people are doing is becoming recycle ready, to have a product that you have on the back of it, this is recyclable. It has to be taken to a recycling center But then there's also monopolymer substrates, which then enable that recycling, because once you have two types of polymers, it's very difficult to recycle. Biodegradable, compostable substrates, we're seeing a lot of work being done with that. Now, the thing with that, though, the biodegradable, compostable substrates are more difficult to print on a lot of the times. The substrates are a little bit coarser, or they're not the best of substrates, but there's a lot of work being done on those. At the moment, they're more expensive. And some brands, a lot of work's being done in New Zealand, where the brands are selling that as a point on the product that is biodegradable or compostable. And you've got two types of biodegradable or compostable. You've got the domestic, which is you just put it in your compost and it degrades, and then you've got industrial, where recycling centres will break down the substrate either through chemicals or through heat. Thank you. Next slide. So the question is, really, how can Flexo printing help with sustainability? We're printing onto a polymer substrate, but the thing is, at the moment, the consumer attention's focused on the packaging. All right, so we can actually help because the printing can actually help this by reducing the amount of material used, decrease make-ready times, which is waste. And you'll probably find some brands will start sort of designating a certain percentage of waste that you have to adhere to, that you can't go beyond that. It's happened in the offset area in catalogue production, where I was involved in with many years. IKEA used to mandate that you could have no more than 5% waste on any of their catalogues that you produced. And I can see the brands actually dictating that as well at some point in time. So you need to be more efficient. You can also reduce the ink usage through plate technologies. The Flexo NX plate uses on average around about 18 to 20% less ink than our competitive products when you're using the same analogues. Now, also less solvents. Now, Flexo uses less solvents than Gravure, so there's less VOCs. So it's a good story. The ability to use thinner substrates without compromising the structure. You're seeing a lot of brands are looking at how they can downscale their the size or the weight of their product. And one of those things is the substrate thickness. It may only be microns, but when you multiply that by millions of packages, that turns into a lot of kilograms worth of plastic. And they're stories that they'll be telling. So you need to be able to help them in that. The fact is that Flexo is fortunate with the CI structure of a press, can hold the substrate stable on the CI, which means that we can print on much thinner substrates than what Gravure can, and unstable substrates. That becomes very important when you're using the substrates with varying print surfaces, that you need to be able to obviously get the quality as well. The other thing is to try and test functional coatings. As I said, the ink manufacturers are doing a lot of work in the functional coatings to replace different barrier properties, so you could actually have one single layer substrate with a functional coating on the top to give you the same characteristics as that layer. The use of extended color gamut. Now, this is an interesting thing. I read a study a while back that there's quite a lot of benefits in using ECG to reduce ink wastage, because if you think about it, you're not cleaning up spot colors each time, you're not returning the spot colors back to the ink room, and you're using less inks to wash. You don't have to wash down the whole deck each time when you change spot colors. That's it's things you don't necessarily think of when you're thinking about ECG. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when you look at extended color gamut, it means that you can actually get all of those colors out of the CMYK, orange, green, violet. In the earlier slides where I showed you the tin tan packs, they used to be all run with spot colors, 9 colors in fact, and now they're down to 4 colors and 1 spot. But the key takeaway is that with extended color gamut, it's exactly how digital printing works. And everybody's become excited about digital printing, and particularly in labels, but that's how it works. Digital printing doesn't have the concept of spot colors. So different variants can be printed together, But more importantly, from a sustainability, ECG reduces the waste. So less, as I said, less solvents in cleaning up, reduced ink returns, faster make-readies, which means less substrate waste, which overall gives you a reduced time, significantly improved press yields, upwards of 30%. So not only are you going to be contributing to the sustainability narrative, but you're actually going to give yourself more press time to be able to print more work. So it's a pretty good win-win situation in terms of selling the story. Next slide, please. So with the extended color gamut, either 4-color or 7-color, a lot of people think, oh, 4-color, that's crazy. But if you think about the ISO standards, they are to a lower gamut than what you can achieve, particularly with NX plates, where we can achieve higher densities. It gets to a point where you get a high density, the gamut starts inverting on itself, so you can't go too high. But the low-hanging fruit, before that, I can't state enough, it's so important to work with the brand. To give you an example, there was a major biscuit chocolate manufacturer that used to print 9-color gravure, and they wanted to be more fleet of foot, faster to market, those sorts of things, have more offerings to be more cost effective in terms of their packaging. They were gravure, 9-color gravure. They went from 9-color gravure to 4-color plus a spot plus the white, and they saved a lot of money. They've invested that money back into the brand by having more products. And the critical thing, that this was a #1 product on the supermarket shelf. And when they moved, it didn't move one bit. They actually gained business, the product grew. So moving from gravure to Flexo did not alter the product shelf appeal, but gave the brand more money to spend on being able to do other things. And that was by what is effectively CMYK extended color gamut plus a spot color, which may be a main theme. But if you're going to do that, it's mandatory to have a color management strategy. And then you've got to work back from the press with control over the process. And then you've got to have consistency with all the components. That's key. You've got to, and one of the main things is every plate has to be identical, so that it is repeatable. Krish talked about being able to repeat job after job because of consistency. You've got to then work with prepress to map the print condition, create the color profile, but then importantly, work with the brand to set their expectations on the proof. And as I said, this applies to both narrow web and wide web. The product on the right, on the left is the proof, and folded over, it's a foil lid, is the printed result. That came up within 15 minutes. That was the changeover time, and they were up to color and ready to run within 15 minutes. That's very important for this particular client because they print on a foil, and the cost of that foil is around about 50 cents a meter. So you don't want to be wasting a lot of time on make readies. Thank you. Next slide. So enter Flexo NX for wide web. Well, we have a unique control of the ink through the DigiCap NX. So we distribute the ink after the analogs and distribute that onto the substrate. That gives us higher densities, yet a thinner ink weight. Now that's important. The thinner ink weight, we're doing a lot of research in terms of what that means, because when you're talking about compostable materials, you've got to have no more ink of a certain, you can't exceed a weight component. So it's very important to have thin ink film weights. It uses less ink, again, stating about the compostable solutions. We have smoother solids, which are more like gravure. On the top right, you've got a Flexo NX solid and then a traditional solid. Now, the Flexo solid that we get is very much like gravure. Then we have the DigiCap Advanced Edge definition, which keeps text and halftone dots open. So on the left in the middle, we've got a 90% dot with Advanced Edge definition, and on the same, from the same plate print, a 90% dot without. So you can see how when the Analox is applying the ink, it's filling in some of those areas. We also have the imaging technology, which again, Krish mentioned about holding 10 microns, which is pretty achievable on narrow web. On wide web, you really need to be sitting around about 21 micron size, but we have a hybrid screening, which enables you to fade to zero, not just in drop shadows, but across all colors, which then makes all colors vibrant. But the important thing is the consistency and predictability of the plates just adds to the process control of the press. Now, with all modern presses, they're becoming more industrial, so that they're more repeatable, and you need a plate that matches that sort of repeatability. And that in turn generates confidence in a brand to match the proof without adjustments. Now, the other key part of this is that the Flexo plate comes up to color. So by the time you're starting to turn the press over, because of the ink distribution of DigiCap NX, the ink is ready to print much faster than any other plate. And so you're going to be starting running much sooner. Now, if your proof doesn't match, you've lost that advantage. So you're then messing around on the press, and wouldn't matter how fast the plates came up to color if it's wrong. So proof to print match color management becomes key. Next slide, please. So then we have just drilling into the components, DigiCap NX patterning. It's measured in microns, and you're seeing images on the left. The building block of our DigiCap patterning is 5 by 10 microns. Now, a human hair is around about 70 microns wide. So we're talking very, very small elements that you can't see with the naked eye. Nowhere known you can see it. It's sort of like a 5,000 line screen. And then the controlled imaging with the square spot imaging allows every one of those pixels to be perfectly placed day in, day out, right? So that every time a plate comes back to be remade, that pixel's always in the same spot, which it may seem, well, that's okay. What does that do? But it means that every time that plate, it's identical to the last one. And so if you set up color management, you can then have predictability and repeatability every time you put a plate up, and knowing that if your press is all under control, that you'll get the same result each time. The other thing with DigiCap, it's applied to every surface, every print surface on every printing element. Right? So, and then we have these multifunctional surface patterns, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, but they are an exciting development and an innovation. We started with our advanced edge definition, but we've just gone one step further with that, and we'll continue to evolve and innovate in that space. The pattern selection of DigiCap, we have a very simple process that our guys work well. It's just a simple one-step process. There's no need to have a wizard because we don't have that many patterns, and we can very quickly hone in to the ideal position of the Analox and the DigiCap pattern, and that gets set. But at the end of the day, it controls the flow of the ink. Thank you. Next slide. This is talking a little bit about the multifunctional surface patterns. Our level 1 was the advanced edge definition, and on the left-hand side, you can see some very large views of the DigiCap patterns, in particular with the advanced edge definition. And that's automatically applied as we make the plate. It doesn't have to be ripped with this, and that actually saves a lot of time, and you're actually working off standard bitmap files to send to plate. Level 2 multifunctional surface pattern is a new innovation, which is pure Flexo. At the moment, it is only solvent-based ink systems, and that's where we've started with the multifunctional surface pattern. We will have other multifunctional surface patterns for other inking systems over time, and we're constantly developing that. As I work with Dr. John Anderson, and as a group, we're constantly looking at how to improve on everything we do. So this is a new generation of microsurface engineering, and for the first time, it allows dots, lines, solids, and reverses on the plate to resist the unwanted ink spread under printing impression. So the history of our DigiCap patterning is in 2010, we released DigiCap NX. That was really improved the solid ink laydown optimization. Then in 2016, we introduced the advanced edge definition, which retained the ink under non-compression. So as the analogs inked the plate, it kept the ink within the area of the element. And in 2021, this year, we released Pure Flexo. That retains the ink when it's under impression and stops the ink spreading out. Quite an exciting development. And you'll see more of that in the incoming months. Next slide, please. Now, the fade to zero, normally this is animated, but we didn't have that opportunity. But the fade to zero, it's normal for digital and gravure. It's normal. There's no discussion about minimum dots on digital or gravure because they don't need it because they don't have a relief plate. But clean whites and clean colors are so important, and Maxtone SX hybrid screening is what we use to achieve the fade to zero. Just to highlight this, you can see there we've got the substrate white over a minimum dot with Flexo, and you can see you can read the ITE, but when you fade it to zero, when it hits the edge of the substrate off that image, you can see a grey edge, and that's what usually differentiates Flexo from gravure. So we have to work, if we're converting gravure to Flexo, we have to work with matching that, and you can see that the fade to zero is to zero, and that's why you can't see the ITE in the substrate white text, and there's no minimum dot. Now, it's not just the highlights. It's the highlights in the unwanted colors. So if you look at the red ice cream or the pink strawberry ice cream, you can see on the left, it's a little bit duller because that's got cyan on it. It's got a minimum dot of cyan. And then again in the purple underneath, it's a little bit cleaner because it doesn't have any yellow in it, because it's, so starting at zero is not just for drop shadows, it's for all colors, and it gives you the vibrance. You look at the raspberries, they look more vibrant in the gravure or the no minimum dot Maxtone SX image. Thank you. Next slide. So we've got another poll question. Again, we've got 30 seconds to respond to this. We'll just get this question up, and as soon as it hits. Okay, so when changing a job from gravure to Flexo, do you believe Flexo packaging will have the same shelf impact visual as gravure? Single choice. So there's yes, no, maybe, yes, but in 5 years' time with more advancements in Flexo. I'm really keen to get your view on this, on what you think about gravure to Flexo in flexible packaging. Okay, we should have a. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's actually, that's interesting. It's last time I polled everybody within Miraclon, I had about a 33% yes. So that's very interesting. Thank you for the feedback on that. Okay, I think next up we have my dear friend Vinay, and who's going to speak about his business and with NX. So thank you, sir.
Yes. We have a very nice plant situated near Pune, and it's having a very state-of-art facility from all the best of machine manufacturers, our partners. And over a period of time, a decade almost, more than that, we have grown along with our partners, as well as we have grown with our customers. So thanks to all, including Miraclon, earlier Kodak, who has been part and parcel of our whole story. So when it comes to Flexo, little experience I have is around 30 years, possibly close to, in Flexo industry. Before I joined Parakh Group, I was with Next slide, please. Yeah. So to brief you on how Parakh Agro in Pune has come up to a level of the CI wide web area is because of, as I said, the partnerships.
Mr. Vinay, I will request you to be a bit louder. The audience is barely hearing you.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, Parakh Agro, with our partners, we have grown, and one of the main partners in the print fraternity was Kodak, the earlier name of Miraclon. 2010, I remember, was the first interaction with Kodak. And that's the time when there was a tussle between the growth story of Roto versus Flexo. And Flexo was very keen to get into the FMCG market, a very huge market, as Steve put, almost 50% of flexible packaging worldwide is into, the packaging is in flexibles. And in that, when it comes to wide web, Roto has more share. In 2010, thanks to the new technology that time, FlexiLNX, which we were amongst the first ones in Asia Pacific to be partnered with Kodak to come up. We did a lot of exercises in order to get it to the standard what we are today. So the first step was to, eliminate getting the plates from outside, waiting for clearances at the airports or whatever road transports, getting it to the plant. The press was waiting. So we decided, okay, let's go in for pre-press of our own. And we thought of looking for partners. And that's the time we came across Kodak FlexiLNX as a system, which was good to go with, because of its unique features. I mean, the features what I've mentioned was, user-friendly. So FlexiLNX, when we say user-friendly, is it allows any pre-press operator to use it without difficulties, because it runs on a platform called Pinergy, and Pinergy is available in many of the offset industries, and offset industry in India particularly is quite big. So a place like Pune, there were almost 10 people who had Pinergy software in 2010. So it became easy for us to adopt to that system. And over a period, first 4 or 5 years, Kodak and Parakh worked on a lot of options in order to make this technology, FlexiLNX, to the level what it is today. So we had a consolidated support from Asia Pacific team as well as the US team, Europe team, in order to get things right. The difficulties faced were all solved, and from there became a platform for Kodak to go into the AED and now the pure Flexo. So yes, FlexiLNX is good. Short turnaround time is what we were looking. We got it, a plate made in 4 hours from the design, once approved. The difference what we saw between the other plates and this was, of course, credit goes to the DigiCap, which we got a very, very sound optical density, a very improved optical density. And then the plate processing capability, where today we can proudly say that we are doing 0.4% dot, yeah, in-house. So that's good. It gives you a very good transitions between colors, which is helping us. And of course, I mean, no regrets on having partnered with Kodak DigiCap NX system, and enlarged our portfolio, which was predominantly only a commodity segment of oil and milk and maybe a bit of FMCG players, to now catering to almost 30% of our produce is exports. So go to Europe, South Europe and UK, catch hold of any of the chips packets, most of it are done on a kind of Flexo system. Some part of Flexel, some part of others, but with the new technology, what Flexel is offering, with the reduced colors, I think we are going great guns in terms of capturing more and more market from the Roto fraternity. It doesn't mean that Roto is a different and not a good technology. I would still say that Roto is Roto. It is one of the best technologies, but some hindrances in order to make it a little bit more environment friendly, little bit more cost effective, little bit more user friendly than Roto, than Flexo. So yes, in the last decade, both the technologies have come across with a lot of changes. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as I mentioned, 20 years back, Flexo had only in CI wide bed category, they had only around 5 to 10 machines. Today, we are talking about more than 125 to 150 machines coming in. And that's mainly because of the improvements what people have done, what the partners have done, whether it is ink, whether it is plate, whether it is analogs. You know, Flexo is a game of variables. So all the variable partners have played a significant role into making it what it is today. Miraclon also has done a lot of work on the plate platform, and they are continuing doing it in terms of meeting the new challenges we will be facing in terms of sustainability angle. We thought in Parakh that, you know, we were not like the big players in the flexible packaging. We were upcoming. We are predominantly a food company. We thought we should make our own mark into the packaging industry. So we thought a little different. We took help of our good partners, and then we thought, let's do some kind of good things into the Flexo fraternity, whether it is in terms of in-house plate making, whether it is in terms of optimized ink dispensing systems to get the color management right, whether it is in terms of process standardization, what we are doing for many years and even today. So all put together, we thought we should, excel into one area, which is Flexo. And with that, we joined hands with all our partners and made it look a little simpler. And I'm not, regretting that efforts what the team took at Parakh Agro, because today, post-COVID, when you're talking about, recyclable, sustainable options, short runs, economic difficulties with converters, very bad phase we are. I'm sure many of the converters who are participants today maybe may agree with me about how their financial conditions are post-COVID. Some are good, but most of them are struggling because of the exponentially increased prices of plastics, polymers, inks, solvents. So now, as the topic of our session suggests, we should look upon doing differently to get the value for money and choose your process right. So I would say today is the chance where people can think about Flexo because two things. One, do the things right to begin with so that you can see some savings in the range of around 3 to 5% than the gravure process. Second, partner with the good people, be with them and listen to whatever they say. There is every possibility that, sometimes we do take shortcuts that we know everything and this is the way it has to be done. No, we have to listen to them because there are certain things which I came to know, Steve, in today's presentations of yours, about pure Flexo and the post AED, which I think is a part that one has to every time change himself to get it right, put new things into progress, and then get your things right at the ground level, at the factory level. So today, I would say choosing a best plate, having the best patterns to work on, like, correct me if I'm wrong, on Kodak, you have, I think, 5 or 6 patterns. So possibly we follow AO1, AO2, and AO4 when it comes to making the print resolution look good. But in the meantime, we also see which pattern, if followed, can reduce our ink consumption. Yeah, because ink costs are exorbitant nowadays, especially white. Yeah, so how do I get my white printed at a less cost? How do I get my YMCK printed at less cost is what is important. And that can always happen through dialogues with the partners, process standardization at your place, and coupled with ink management systems. So we, along with our partners, SICWORK, we have a fully automized ink dispensing system for all our 4 Flexo lines. And believe me, we have seen massive changes when it comes to A, changeover times, B, cost reduction, C, press return reduction, D, the plate interval of change, or rather plate run length increase. So collectively, I think a good way to go ahead with a process change for one, if we have to try options coming into Flexo. Have the next slide, please. Yeah. So let's see if we can take on, but a good message for if at all there are brand managers here is Flexo in the last decade has come up to a very high extent. Going further in terms of sustainability, where films like polyester and CPP and BOPP may get a hit, and people may change towards LDPE films, thin films. Question mark. Thin films is a question mark because a lot of rules and regulations of different countries are there when it comes to thin film. But yes, when it comes to LDPE film, Flexo is the process to go with. When it comes to LDPE film, you need to have your basics right on all the variables you have. So for a brand, it's not only a concern of getting things right, which looks good at the shelf. It also is important how the sustainable angle is and how the overall cost proportion is there. So over to Steve, and thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you, sir. And I've had the absolute pleasure of being out to Vinay's site with their amazing team, and they are leading the way and continue to, and they're a very impressive team, and congratulations on your ongoing success. And thank you again for joining us today. It's wonderful having partners like that we can work with and talk to and talk about the issues, and Vinay is testament to that. So thank you again. What's important to a brand? And Vinay, you touched on this a bit in terms of, brands really need cost-effective packaging. And as Vinay mentioned, the cost of, the polymers are going up, inks are going up, solvent prices are going up, any petrochemical stuff. So, the brands will always look at what's the most cost-effective packaging. That may be the least amount of colors, so reducing costs, cost-effective printing, but most importantly, designs that deliver the brand's message and inform, but then shelf impact. And as a FMCG product, it's got to have shelf impact, and because key is having the consumer noticing the product on the shelf. And sustainability is becoming a key influencer, as Vinay also touched on. And anything that helps with the sustainability narrative is important to a brand. They really want to hear what you can do to help them present a better picture in the sustainability area. But if you look at if efficiency, speed to market, and quality are up and costs are down, is the print process important? But now, originally gravure, and Vinay mentioned 20 years ago, it was selected. It was the best option for quality. There was no choice. There is now a choice, and that's one of the what we need to focus on. So next slide, please, and we'll just walk into this a little bit. So screen ruling. Now, we hear this a lot. Gravure prints at 175 line screen. Now, is the higher screen ruling better? The reason gravure has to print at 175 is that it has to engrave the text at the screen ruling. So you need the high as possible. But we're talking about Flexo, and in the case of Flexo, is a higher screen ruling better? Is better quality? Often people measure quality by the number. An 8K TV must be twice as good as a 4K TV, just because it's a higher number. So the only thing that doesn't count as a higher number is better is golf, but most people think that the higher number the better. But FMCG brands require value at the lowest cost. That is their main purpose. They're fast-moving consumer goods. They want to have value at the lowest cost. So does printing Flexo on 175 line add to the value of a product? That's the question you've got to ask. It will increase the cost through lower press yields because you're also narrowing the operational latitude on press. You're going to have to run the press at a slower speed. You're going to stop and clean more often, which increases the waste. It slows down the lamination process because you've got to take those imperfections out of the run. We know from Flexo NX that the greatest efficiencies on press are achieved when you're running at about 133 to 150 line, mainly 133 line screen, where you can run faster with less stops, and that reduces the waste if you have got less stops. Now, Flexo NX can print at 175 lines and above. We've got the highest resolution film on the market. We can actually do 300 line screen. But we don't push that because it's not cost effective to our customers in their print area, because it's going to slow you down. And in fact, it loses contrast because of the optical dot gain of a higher screen ruling. And on the right, I've tried to sort of explain about, this is the cost value equation is what most brand managers will look at. And 133 will give you good cost, good value. 175 increases the cost, but does it increase the value? You got to ask yourself that question. Next, please. So shelf impact is not a screen ruling, because if we look at what shelf impact is, the vibrance of a product on shelf, it's the smooth solid ink laydown and color vibrance. That's required for all process colors, and the white ink, if you're reverse printing, has to be clean and smooth, because that gives you a much better, it's like having an A1 stock for offset. It is the reflective base that all the colors come through. So the smoother the white, the more vibrant it will look. You've got to have all the tonal values from 0 to 100%, so that you've got, within CMYK, with 8-bit colors, we have 16 million colors we can work with, and that's how many we reproduce in the gamut. But if you're starting to compress the range because it's filling in, you're losing some of those colors. They blur into the other. They just become the other. You've got to start print tones at 0%. That impacts clean colors. Now, all of those things I've just mentioned are all independent of screen ruling. They don't have anything to do with screen ruling, but they're the things that are the most important to shelf impact. Now, all of those are achieved with the unique capabilities of Flexo NX. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting thing. This is visual versus technical. We are our worst enemy. We often walk around with magnifying glasses. Now, the top image you can see there is, and I normally have this animated, is what you see at arm's length with the naked eye on this pack that those images were taken from. On the left is Flexo and the right is Gravure. The enlarged image is under a 60 times magnification. And you can see the dots on the mister, and you can see the text is very smooth. If you look at Gravure, the text is rather chatty. But at arm's length of the naked eye, you don't see either of those. The text looks good. Most people are very surprised when they see an enlarged image of Gravure text, because they just think it's the best quality. But how could that be? Because it is, because you don't see it. So shelf impact is judged by consumers at arm's length, not under a magnifying glass. Now, I think I'm the only weird person that goes into a supermarket with a magnifying glass. Maybe other people in the industry do as well, but I do look at dot structures and how it's printed. But the consumer will not. Next slide, please. So at the supermarket, when people are viewing a product, a consumer is viewing the product, if all things are equal, dot gain, densities, contrast, a pack printed at 175 line screen will visually be identical pack printed at 133 line screen when viewed at 26 inches or 66 centimeters, which is about where that woman's standing in front of the supermarket shelf. Consumers do not make buying decisions with a magnifying glass. We are producing a product for a supermarket shelf for a consumer to pick up and buy. You've got 7 seconds of the first moment of truth when a consumer comes up to a supermarket shelf and decides whether they're going to pick up that product or not. Shelf impact is critical. And if at that distance, you don't see a difference between 175 or 133, anything you put into that product that's going to cost more money hasn't achieved anything on the supermarket shelf. Next slide, please. So we're getting close to the end, so I hope we haven't bored you all to snores, but when we look at, oh, sorry, can we just go back? When we look at the future it's not one or the other, and Vinay said Rotogravure is a very good product, and it is. But when we look at the future, we probably look at brands will increasingly be able to specify a requirement without specifying a particular print process. So if they want an extremely short run, a design development, market research, personalization, digital would be fine. It's perfect, providing there's quality parity with the shelf impact, that nobody sees any difference on the shelf. Right? Flexography, brand design changes, freedom of design. You look at Gravure, it excels in extremely long runs, millions and millions of cigarette packs, a classic case. And also where there's a small, very small repeat with a continuous color. Gravure eats that stuff. So it's about coexistence, but a brand will be more appreciative of not having to have a discussion about whether I do this Gravure and I compromise something. Over time, we'll end up looking at that with quality parity between the processes. It will only, the specification of what you end up printing will be based on really what your requirement is, not the printing process. Thank you. Next slide. So if we just wrapping this up, the fuel for your growth with Flexo, when we look at sustainability, if I just summarize these points, it's rapidly becoming a major consideration. And brands will be looking at innovation with substrates. Some are difficult to print on. We know with Flexo NX, we can maintain shelf impact because we can actually print over a very diverse range of substrates and less easy substrates to print on. We get excellent results. We've got a very broad range that we can print on, whereas other plates will be very specific in terms of the substrate. Brands will continue, since Adam was a pup, FMCG brands have been looking at how they can get cost efficiencies in their packaging. Now, when you're printing something, look at the total cost of production, not just the individual consumable cost. And this is often a mistake we make, that we'll be looking at, the cost of the ink, the cost of a plate. But if if you look at the Flexo NX, it can actually reduce the number of plates used. We don't have line and tone plates anymore because we can actually get the density out of a black without having to squash the hell out of it that will ruin the tone. So we put all those together. We have higher densities and we can actually reduce the make ready times because it comes up the color much faster. And again, as Vinay mentioned, having color management is a critical piece of that. So as a result of that, we're going to have less waste and improve press yields, improve profitability, and you're going to need that to be able to counter the price increases with raw materials that we're seeing. So you're going to need to try and be the lowest cost producer. Now that may not necessarily mean buying the cheapest product, but it's actually the one that buying the products that actually provide the value downstream. Flexo NX can change the conversation with brands. So by providing shelf impact with Flexo, which has visual parity with gravure and digital, you can then have that conversation with a brand about, well, here is a benefit to use Flexo that will give you these benefits. And with a cost value equation that improves efficiencies on press and reduces waste. Investing in systems and technologies that enable agility and flexibility that allows, allowing to adapt for ever-evolving industry trends. We're very proud to say that the Parakh Agro and Vinay were the first business in Asia to put in a Flexo NX system. Their imager is capable of outputting material that we're actually producing today, and including the ultra water wash plates. So nothing, we actually build the technology around what we have, and we've been very fortunate in the fact that it's very advanced. It was very advanced, but we're not sort of coming out and saying, well, okay, that was last year's model. You now need this one for this particular innovation. Next slide, please. And so I came across this and I thought this was an interesting quote from Gary Hamel, who's retired now, but he came up with core competencies and a lot of great business books out of the States. And innovation is the fuel for growth. When a company runs out of innovation, it runs out of growth. I'm here to say that Miraclon has got a lot of growth ahead of itself because we continue to innovate. We're not stopping where we are today. We will continue to innovate and we'll continue to grow with the support of our great clients. So thank you. Next slide. That QR code will be a link to my email address if anybody wants to email me at any time. It's just easier. COVID's brought out the best in QR codes. Okay, so thank you again for your time and patience and sitting through this. It's always a pleasure to talk to a group. I'm looking forward to when it can be face-to-face again and hopefully sometime soon. So thank you. I think we're moving over to questions and answers.
Thanks, Steve. So I appreciate everyone's patience. I know we are slightly over time, but I still want to take this opportunity because we have everyone still with us to see if we can take on some questions from the audience. The first question is to Steve, and it reads, which key elements in Flexo are making it cost effective versus gravure, and what is the winning combination for Flexo?
Good question. It's a lot of it is the ability to print on thinner substrates, and the less inks and solvents. They're important factors, but it doesn't always work out that way because the volume of flexible gravure, the unit costs of solvents and inks is less because of the volumes. But I think as India's got rid of toluene out of the use as solvents, then we're going to see the cost of solvents increase. So you'd really be wanting to use less of them. So I think there's probably a combination of things, Hirsch. I think not just one thing, but certainly it has a lot of advantages in terms of being able to print on different substrates and thinner substrates and less stable substrates.
Right. That's a good one. Then we have one question from Shirish at Seegwork. This one is for Krish. It reads, what is your driver to select a particular print process for the label printing? And what is the critical factor for each technology type when you choose the print process?
Yeah, so mostly it depends on the size of the label and the quantity which we receive from clients, and also how many SKUs they have of a particular job. So sometimes same job which we are printing on digital goes on to Flexo also when they start increasing the quantity of the label, because we can get the same results. So typically depends on many factors. And also it depends on the ink coverage, whether it's a very high ink coverage, and if a customer is not able to pay that high ink coverage on a digital press, and even if it's a small quantity label, then you can move on to Flexo if they're not really able to pay that much high amount on digital. So depends on various factors which we have to consider before choosing the technology.
Right. Thanks for that. The next one is for Vinay. Is there a difference when you print a surface print job versus a reverse print job?
It should not be, but taking care of the nature of the film, the reverse jobs are always on cast films, whether it is polyester or BOPP and sorts of that. Primarily, most important factor comes is the white color when it comes to reverse printing. Yeah, white is good, then your print will definitely be good. So I would say easier on a surface because you have white master batch instead of a white ink.
Right.
Makes it more easier. But when you talk about the integrity of the substrate or the material to be printed, reverse is better.
All right.
The brand manager's angle, jobs printed on reverse will always look sharper and cleaner than on surface.
Yeah.
Right.
Because of particularly on a white bed, the film it is resting on a CI drum, so you get an extra cushion there. You get which is not there in a narrow web to a large extent. White has got a full cushion throughout, so becomes easier. Reverse print, I would go with reverse print easier than surface, though some may disagree.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how we answered this. Is what is the fastest turnaround time achievable in Flexo for an 8-color job?
See, it all depends on how you do your changeover. Yeah, when I say changeover, it comes into two categories. One is a mechanical changeover, and other is a quality changeover. So mechanical changeover is something which the team has to keep it ready, whether depending on the sequence of the planning, the analoxes and inks and all that to be kept ready, and do that in the less possible time. And then when it comes to quality changeover, it all depends on the how all your variables are taken care of. Rather, right ink to come on the press, right plate to come on the press, right analogs to come on the press. Yeah. So if I take both those combinations A and B, I would say a typical time would be, a sensible time would be between 40 minutes to 60 minutes. Yeah.
Right, thanks. Then Steve, I think this one is something you can take on. We discussed ECG during the presentation. Now, the question is, why does Grivios struggle with ECG, and why is ECG still not something that's very popular with converters in spite of the benefits that it offers?
It's a very good question again. Gravure will struggle from the point of view that registration between decks. So, they would prefer to run text as a spot color rather than having to register it. And that becomes critical. So, Gravure, there are some people that are trying extended color gamut on Gravure, but there's certainly not a lot of uptake on it. One of the key things is you run out of angles because you've got limited angles on Gravure. You're only working within a set angles. You don't have the 90 degrees to work with. You've only got 60 degrees because of the way that the angles are achieved. And you run out of angles pretty quickly with your other colors because you need to have some variations. Having said that, you can duplicate angles on complementary colors. So you put the magenta and the green on the same angle. But the other thing is with Gravure that it's, there's a lot of work that's done on press to get the inks right. And I don't think they've really done as much work in terms of standardizing that because proofing's more difficult. But there's no reason why they couldn't, but I haven't seen much uptake on it, to be quite honest. And I think registration could be a major issue with it. But in terms of on Flexo, we're seeing more and more people, and I think if you come to the realization that this is how digital works, that you're going to see probably more of it. And the fact is that it is more efficient. But I will restate the fact that you've got to work with the brand because it is different, and you've got to give the brand something to encourage them to do that, to move across and work with them. Otherwise, if you don't set the expectations right with the brand, they could well be disappointed because they're used to seeing spot colors as spot colors and not as a screen. So there's some certain things that will catch their eye that they may not be that happy with. So you've got to really work them through the benefits. But the key with the ECG, whatever you do, whether it's Gravure or Flexo, is repeatability. You've got to be able to repeat and have all of those variables that Vinay mentioned under control so that it's repeatable, so that you can just change plates and not have to adjust things. You don't have to readjust inks. You don't have to swap out analoxes. If everything is predictable and you've got a very good color management process in place, it's just a matter of changing plates. So the changeovers is just a product of the mechanicals, as Vinay mentioned. It's an exciting area. The interesting thing is, and I don't know how much time we've got, but we had a client in Melbourne, a digital printer that decided to go to Flexo. Now, he didn't even think about going to CMYK plus spot colors because his digital printing was all 7 color. It was ECG because it doesn't have it. So he just went straight to ECG. And once we started working with him with the NX plate, he ends up now with quality parity between his labels. Digital is what he does with Flexo. So it's now just a product of what's the volume. And so he'll run a certain range of products digital, and then another flavor, which may be a more greater selling product. He can run Flexo and there's no difference between what he's achieving. It's quite exciting to see, but that's all extended color gamut. So I think there's going to be more uptake of it because there are some serious benefits in it in terms of sustainability, in terms of ink returns, wastage, all the sorts of benefits that we see. So if you can tell that story to a brand and then get them involved with that process, I think we'll see more uptake. But another key part of it, which I think is missing a little bit, is there's a lot of people doing it right, but there's a lot of people that aren't doing it, and that's color management. You have to have color management. You have to be able to control the process to have a proof that matches, because you cannot make adjustments on press when you're using ECG, because you can't just bring up a color because it's affecting the whole job. So you're limited to what you can do. So critical brands on board, and then the other thing is color management, and then process controls. They all go together.
Right. A few questions, but then I'll just take this one more because this is quite fundamental again. So the question is surface patterning applied within the rip or after the rip? And I think, Steve, you can take this one.
Yeah, I think, it is produced and applied after the rip. So it's applied as we go to make the plate. It's applied and imaged onto our thermal imaging layer, and it's all part of a very quick process. And that includes the multifunctional surface patterns that we're developing as well. They're all applied in the software and after the file's been ripped. So we can just take any ripped file off any systems, Prinergy, ESCO, they can all be used and had that applied digicap surface patterning. It is a unique system.
Right, thanks.
Thank you, Ash, for taking up these interesting questions from the audience. We'll also thank our speakers today, Mr. Krish Chhatwal, Mr. Vinay Nalawade, and Mr. Steve Smith, to have joined us today and make this session not only knowledgeable, but an interesting insight into both global case studies as well as a shared experience of actual customer applications. So thank you to all our speakers, and thank you, in fact, to all the audience who joined us from all parts of the world. Thank you so much for joining us today for this session from Miraclon. Stay connected, stay safe, and at Print Packaging and Network event, we'll surely be tuning you for another industry event. Thank you all.